Good morning and welcome back to the channel. It's an early morning this morning and I'm making my annual trip to the beautiful, stunning Bempton Cliffs. I love Bempton Cliffs. I would go as far as to say it is probably my favourite RSPB reserve in the country. It's absolutely stunning, and at this time of year all the seabirds are nesting on the cliff tops. We've got well in excess of 1,000 gannets, we've got guillemot, we've got razorbill, we've got puffins, and then there's always a chance of seeing owls, barn owls, short-eared owls, although the short-eared owls tend to be more in the winter, and you'll have seen that I've done videos of that in the past. And then there is always the chance when you come to Bempton Cliff of a surprise. Peregrines often hunt kittiwake off the cliff tops, and there is a resident peregrine falcon that's often seen hunting along the cliffs. There's kestrels, there's hare, there's deer, there's absolutely anything that you could possibly imagine within reason turns up at Bempton Cliffs. I've photographed dolphin, people have photographed whales swimming across in the sea. So it really is a premier location that can throw up some real surprises. So come along for the journey and see what I see. So this is the first platform you come to if you bear left as you come out of the visitor centre, and it's a really interesting and often overlooked little platform. We've got this little crack in the cliffs that we can see behind me here that goes, you can see all the way down to the sea, and you'll get lots and lots of birds nesting on this little crack here. But what's really important about this crack, if I just drop the camera down so you can see it, what's really important about this is that what you get is some really nice lines of the cliff face, and when you get some of the birds that are just sat off on that line and breaking the silhouette of the line, it has some potential for some really nice photographs. Now the prize at this time of year is usually the puffin. That's what everybody's going to try and photograph. And what I would say is, whilst the puffin are absolutely fantastic and, you know, without doubt, oh, the barn owl's out. And that's going to be my number one tip. My number one tip when you visit Bempton Cliffs is always going to be, always look over your shoulder. We spend so much time looking at the cliff face, looking out to sea, but sometimes the barn owl, and they're a silent hunter, creeps right up on you. And that did a flyby right behind me and was probably within 10 metres of the path. If I'd have had my camera up and been focused on the cliff tops and not glanced occasionally over my shoulder, that barn owl would have passed all the way through without me seeing it. So, going back to my point that I was making just earlier about the prize. And so lots of people photograph the puffins. That's what they come here to see. They come here to see the puffins. And they are, without doubt, quite possibly one of the most photogenic birds on the planet. You know, they're incredible birds to photograph. But what I would say is, don't neglect the other species that are on offer at Bempton Cliffs. The gannet here are stunning, absolutely stunning, and in the right conditions produce some spectacular shots. particularly if you're looking for those high key shots. And this really lends itself to it, particularly when you've got the sunlight on the sea behind it. You can really overexpose the image, but protect the highlights of the birds, so you're getting that nice high key shot. And the razorbill, see the barn owl's coming back now, so I'm going to just move back into my position. The razorbill's definitely worth looking at, and the guillemots, stunning birds by their own right, and it's only limited by your creativity because there's just so much to photograph. Oh, it's stopped on the fence. Wow. Right, I'm going to get myself into position and wait for this barn owl to move back down. That was sensational. Talk about my heart beating 100 miles an hour in a short space of time. The barn owl landed on the bench just a little bit further up on the path, and he sat on the bench for a little bit of time, and he was just surveying. I mean, you can see how dense all this meadow is now. They've really let it grow, and so he was watching the meadow, and then he dived off the bench into the meadow, presumably to grab a vole. And then came in a very large crow, and I knew what that crow's intentions was. It was going to mug the barn owl the minute it took off. So I just got myself into a position, locked onto where the crow was, and then waited. My reactions were just a little bit too slow. I've got one shot where I've got both of the barn owl and the crow in the same shot. A fantastic little shot. So if it is decent, I'll pop it up on the screen now for you to see. So my next big tip is going to be checking the weather. Now, it's an obvious one, isn't it? And the weather doesn't necessarily deter me from coming, but it certainly makes me think about what kind of shots I'm likely to achieve. So there's not a lot of wind today at all, hence the reason the barn owl's up and he's hunting. You don't tend to see the barn owl that frequently when when it's windy. But the wind that we've got at the moment is a very, very gentle offshore breeze. Now, offshore breezes and offshore wind is really the opposite of what you're looking for. When the wind is blowing offshore, what that does is it pushes the birds down below the cliff. So you will see on my horizon behind me there are no birds other than the occasional pigeon, the occasional gull flying at this height. Most of the birds are actually low below the cliff. I think again it's just flown just below the cliff top there, and that's because of the wind direction. When you get a wind direction that's onshore and it's blowing towards the cliff, that pushes the gannets up above the cliff top, and that's the perfect conditions for when you're photographing the gannet in flight. But as you can see, the sun is coming out behind me, and it is turning out to be absolutely an epic morning. So I'm just going to crack on and get some photographs. So these are the exact conditions that I'm talking about, and what I've got is I've got the sun directly behind, absolutely directly behind the birds. Now, when you look at that, you think that is an absolute nightmare to photograph. But now my background is much brighter than my white bird is. And so I can overexpose the image to ensure that I get a correct exposure on the gannets. And by overexposing the image, what I'm going to create is a really high key image. So the background is going to be pure white, so we're going to have a lovely pure white background, and then my bird will be exposed absolutely correctly. So I've got all the feather detail in those white feathers, and I can only achieve that when I've got the sun directly behind the subject. So the sun, and ideally what I want is, and it's the reason for coming early in the morning, is the sun just coming up. It's got a lovely long beam of light that's coming off the sun over the water, and then I'm shooting the bird, so that's directly behind it, and that allows me to create a really high key image in camera. It means that when it comes to my editing, I don't have to do as much, which means because I don't have to do as much, it looks more realistic. It doesn't look like it's been edited to look like that, and it just throws up some truly wonderful photographs. Now, the second thing that I'm going to say when you're trying to achieve photographs like this, what you're looking for is behaviour. What you're looking for is something that makes the gannets stand out, and so you know exactly what they're doing. Now, what I often look for in these situations is them billing, and when the gannets have paired up, they've laid their eggs, and so what will happen is one of them will go off to sea, to hunt, or to fetch bedding. And then when it returns, the first thing that the gannets will do is to reconnect and re-establish that bond, is they will rub bills with one another. And that's the behaviour that I'm looking for, because if I can capture that in a high key moment, it really does produce some beautiful photographs. So just to take a moment really to speak about the differences between the species. So we've got the gannets in front of us, and the gannets will will nest and always group in. Will always perch in groups. Then you've got the razorbill. Now I like the razorbill. I always think they look like someone in a dinner jacket. They've got this really clean, crisp black and white lines, and they've got this stunning yellow mouth. And so if you can photograph them with the mouth open, it looks fantastic. But you'll often find that the razorbill, particularly at Bempton Cliffs, tend to roost in individuals. So they'll be in the pairings, but they tend to be by themselves. And then by way of a contrast, the guillemot just look like they're clinging onto the cliff. They seem to cram into the tiniest of little ledges, and we can see the guillemot here all the way along the cliff, really shoulder to shoulder tucked in. Now, the guillemot will lay a single egg, and that single egg is shaped so that it sits nicely onto the cliff ledge. And I think I saw it on Springwatch recently, that they have individual markings, a bit like our thumbprint, that allows them to identify their egg. Now, I've just been having a quick look at the guillemot that's down there, and I can't see any eggs, so it might be that that's not a roost, but equally they could be sat on eggs and just keeping them nice and warm. But they're really different, and they have very different characteristics, and both produce some really remarkable opportunities to get some photographs. You really have got to keep your wits about you when you're walking around at Bempton Cliffs. A number of reasons. One, the path is quite uneven. I've rolled an ankle here in the past because it is really uneven, and you become so fixated on the birds that you're looking at, and scanning the horizon for whatever it is that you're looking for. Always remember to look at your feet, particularly if you're as clumsy as I am. And then the second thing is, don't neglect the small bird life. Now I've just seen a bird land on the post in front of me and then land on some of the vegetation behind it, and I've snapped some photographs of it, but I actually couldn't tell you what bird it is at this moment. I'm going to have to look it up. So it's not a bird that I recognised. It looked a little bit like a warbler, and it could very well have been, but I didn't recognise it, so I will have a look at that when I get back to the van in a little while. The barn owl has just done another flyby whilst I was facing the cliff. I turned around and looked back down the cliff top and saw everybody pointing the cameras at the field behind me. Turned around and the barn owl was flying off in the opposite direction. It had probably just been hunting behind me as well, and there was me looking the wrong way. And that's what I mean, you've got to constantly be scanning around and looking and keeping everything, all your senses aware of what's around you, because you just never know when an opportunity is going to present itself. All the time scanning as you walk, checking the fields, checking the cliff line, and then whenever you get a gap in the vegetation, they're the points where you need to be looking down to the cliff tops. And then the other thing is being aware, acutely aware of the bird behaviour around you. You'll often find that as the peregrine comes through, all the kittiwake will take flight from the cliff, and they'll do that as an instinctively reaction to a predator coming into the area, and they kind of all fly out, they do a big circle round, and they all come back to roost on the cliff top. So just keeping your eye on bird behaviour like that is a really good way to know what might be in the area and what potential shots you might be able to get. So what I'm doing now is I've found a really nice little spot. It's just off to the side of one of the platforms, and it gives me a really good vantage of the birds as they're coming into land. And so I've had some really nice opportunities with fulmar. The fulmar are a beautiful bird, and they're flying almost in front of me. I'm fairly certain I could reach out and touch them, and they're getting that close. And then I'm getting guillemot and razorbill that they're coming in, and what I'm hoping for is that there is some nest sites just below me here, and that they're going to come in with some form of fish in their beaks. That's the aim. But as they're coming in, obviously they're air braking by reverse flapping as fast as they can, and that produces some really nice photographs. And as you can see, the light is just absolutely exquisite at the minute, so I'm making the most of this before I go back for my breakfast. A little tip when you come to Bempton Cliffs: if you look around the path, the main pathway will walk you through, and then every now and again there'll be an area that's right up against the fence that's got no grass on it, and that gives you a really good indication that it gives you a good vantage point, or there's something to be seen at that, because that many people have stood there, it's worn the grass away. So just a little tip as you're walking along, to just watch the track and look for spots that other people have used, because no doubt that is producing some good images. But I'm really enjoying this. I can see a fulmar coming in right now. And I'm just getting some really nice close shots. So if you want to photograph birds in flight, if you want to photograph the gannets in flight in particular, then the best thing to do when you're at Bempton Cliffs is from the visitor centre, turn right, head right, and there is an area of land where the grass has been very much pulled away, and that's because that's an area that the gannet come to remove the grass to line their nests. And then it's a case of positioning yourself in an area where you can see the gannet coming across in front of you. Now, there are two ways that I like to approach this. The first way I like to approach this is by having a really fast shutter speed. So my shutter speed is going to be probably well above 2,000th of a second. I'm going to be shooting with a reasonably wide open aperture with auto ISO. And what I'll be doing in that situation is I'll be underexposing the image ever so slightly, just to protect the whites. And then the second way that I like to photograph this, and I did allude to it earlier in the video, is by using a slow shutter speed and a panning technique. And this allows me, particularly when they're just a little bit lower, to get that blurred movement of the water behind, and that gives that sense of movement that with a fast shutter speed never achieves. So I'm going to have a go at both techniques now: fast shutter speed, slow shutter speed, and I'll show you the images and how they look different. So the key here is looking for different behaviours in birds. If the bird is just soaring, then I'll use the slow shutter speed technique. If the bird is resisting to the wind, flapping its wings frantically, then the slow shutter speed technique, it doesn't always pull off, because what you're going to get is a blurred image of the bird, and that's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is the bird to be sharp and the background to be blurred to demonstrate the movement in the bird. So all the time tracking the horizon, looking for the bird, and then once you've found a bird that you think that's going to come in, track your bird, lock on, and then take your shots. And it is a case of, you can very quickly become overwhelmed in an area like this because there's so many birds moving through. So pick your bird, pick your subject, lock onto it, and then track it through, and resist the temptation to jump onto other birds. I'm going to bring the video to a close there. It's been an absolutely stunning morning at Bempton Cliffs. It never fails to impress. What I would say, and it's my final tip for Bempton Cliffs, is get here before the crowds arrive. We are now at 11:15 and the car parks are full. They're in the overspill car park. The platforms are absolutely ram-packed, and people are, pushing and shoving to get best viewpoints. I particularly don't like it like that. I like to come really early, as I did this morning. I was on the cliff tops for 5:30. If you can be here before the crowds, you get Bempton Cliffs at its best. The barn owl's nowhere to be seen at this time of day, so you miss out on things like that. So yeah, I think in the summer months, when you've got all the breeding birds on the cliff tops, be here early, beat the crowds, and make the best of what Bempton Cliffs has to offer. You can probably barely hear me now over the cacophony of sound of the birds all around me. We've got wrens singing, we've got skylarks calling from the sky. There is a wood pigeon, I think, just behind me somewhere there, calling away. And it's just beautiful to hear all the bird song. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like and a subscribe. If you want to drop me a comment, I respond to every single comment, so it's great to respond to people and drop comments. If there's something that you'd like me to film, a place that you'd like me to visit, drop that in the comment as well, or catch me on my email address if you want to just send it me in private. That would also be fantastic. We've got a Buy Me a Coffee webpage. The link will be at the bottom of the screen now. A massive thank you to all those people who take the time and spend their hard-earned cash on donating towards the channel. It really, really does make all the difference. There are certain individuals, there's a guy called Alan who every week, without fail, has bought me a coffee since I've started the Buy Me a Coffee webpage, and I really, really appreciate that. There are others as well. I apologise if I've missed you out, but I appreciate every single one of you. I'll pop some names up on the screen now so you can see all those people who've taken the time to buy me a coffee. Thank you. And from Bempton Cliffs, and until next time, ta-ra.